Personally, I'm looking forward to every single playoff game in our new 12-team era. But there's always a best game or best matchup, and to me, that is hands down Ohio State hosting Tennessee. From a brand standpoint, it's a big matchup, we know that, but it's deeper. The archetype of these two teams should lead to a hell of a game. We know how good Ohio State's roster is. And that brings me to my main point of this open, because in a weird way, this Tennessee team is probably built better than any recent Vol team that's had success to actually go win this game in Columbus. No disrespect to Hendon Hooker and the incredible teams that he was on, but I actually like this style that Tennessee portrays to give them the best shot to go win against the Buckeyes. Their old teams were track meet winners. They're like the Globetrotters, where it was purely about offensive tempo and just trying to outscore opponents while defense was borderline optional. This year's team is almost the polar opposite. That isn't to say they can't be explosive or that they're bad offensively, but they carve the turkey a different way. Small cut by small cut. They have no problem pounding the ball, setting up play action, and beating you with a sound defense that flies around with bad intentions at ramming speed. They can actually take the ball and go hide for a while. Both of these teams have a top 5 scoring defense, and while Ohio State has a lot of offensive firepower, Tennessee is good enough on defense to negate that the way that Michigan did. And if Ohio State plans to just line up and try and pump the balls into submission in the run game, that task could turn out to be Herculean, especially after we just watched them try and do it and fail against that same Michigan team. Now, past Tennessee teams, I don't think, would be able to consistently stop the talented running back tandem that Ohio State has, which would lead to skinny coverage, opening the door for Igbuka, Smith, and Tate to feast vertically down the field at any point in time. In fact, if Ohio State wanted, they probably could keep the former high-flying Tennessee offense off the field and limit their possessions, which in turn would create a more narrow path to victory for the boys from Rocky Top. That isn't to say Ohio State won't win. After all, this is a tough ask for Tennessee to go into their house and take the remote. But out of all the previous Tennessee teams that have recently found success, this type of team may give them the best chance structurally that they could have ever asked for heading into this game. David Cohn, former Michigan quarterback, my brother, former Western State, Colorado wide receiver, Blaine Crane. Cohn, are you getting what I'm saying here? Like, if you look at the way this Tennessee team is put together, it is different than what we've seen. I know Nico is still young, but he's played in tough environments. He's been through up and downs. But at any point in time, Tennessee can line up and have a chance to run the ball and stop the run. And when you can do that, you don't have to put up fireworks offensively to be able to win games. And maybe in cold weather against an Ohio State team that's really talented, that does give this team the best chance to win.
No doubt. Well, if you're going to go on the road and play in a cold weather playoff game, there's two things you'd like to have. That's a strong defense. We always say defense travels. Tennessee has that, and a great run game. We just talked about their running back has 1,400 rushing yards and 22 touchdowns this season. So that's going to be Nico Iamaleava's, those are his two best friends. I think that Nico needs to play a good football game in order for Tennessee to win. And there's a couple reasons that I say this. If you're a Tennessee fan or a college football fan around the country and you're going to watch this game, but you really hadn't watched the Buckeyes play that much, you only watched them play against Oregon and you say, well, they lost that one, or you only watched them play against their arch rival in Michigan, you say, ha, you lost to a terrible 500 Michigan team. You know, just remember, Michigan's defense really had to throw a perfect game to win that. And we have a couple clips here. We want to break it down from a fundamental standpoint on setting the edge and the way Mason Graham played and all of the details that go into that. But high level, Michigan's defense really threw a perfect game at the Buckeyes. Now, Tennessee's defense, I think, is built in a similar way. They could do the same thing. And you know, we've talked about Dylan Sampson being able to break out in the running game, especially in the second half of some of these games. But when you go down the stretch of Tennessee's season, right, especially right there in the middle, it was Arkansas, Florida, Alabama, 1, 2, 3. Those 3 games, they were shut out, all 3 of those games in the first half. In the next week against Kentucky, only scored 1 touchdown. So that's 7 points over 4 games in the middle of their season. Now, how you go on the road and score 17 in the first half against that Georgia defense, I'm not quite sure, but that was a good sign. I think that they'll be able to find some success in the run game with Dylan Sampson. We have a clip of that we're going to show, and I do think that Tennessee's defense is set up to do some similar things that Michigan's defense did against the Buckeyes. I just don't think they're both going to throw a perfect game the way that Michigan was in a rivalry game. I think Nico's going to have to make some throws for Tennessee to win.
Well, and I think there's, as different as they are in years, the comparison of Will Howard throwing the ball and Nico throwing the ball, I think there's some similarities there. But I want to focus in on a word you said. You said that you think Nico has to play good.
Not perfect.
And that is my point. I don't think he has to play elite. I don't think Will Howard has to play elite. In the past, Hendon Hooker would have to go play elite to beat this Ohio State team. That is the difference. But in that same token, me sitting here and saying, oh, well, Tennessee can just run the ball and stop the run, that is what cost them against Arkansas a little bit when they shut it down. Remember, they beat Oklahoma. They just held on. They can't necessarily just go into it saying, we're not going to give Nico the chance to screw it up. But if he can make a couple of those throws, just like Will Howard, if he can make a couple of those throws to Jeremiah Smith, to Egbuka. I mean, you look around the embarrassment of riches that Ohio State has. Not that Tennessee doesn't have good players. I mean, you look at Thornton, some of the pieces they have. I just don't think this Tennessee team has to go play above board from an explosive standpoint on offense to be able to go and win this game. And Blaine, that gets me to my point of if you're the offense, if you're Josh Heupel, right, or you're Chip Kelly, you are going to feel each other out at the beginning of this game. You are going to see if they can stop the run, because the first answer isn't to go out there and let Nico throw the ball 75 times and then Will Howard throw the ball 75 times. But when it comes down to it, if you're the OC for either team, would you surprise that defense a little bit by maybe pitching backwards? Or is it just going to be that quick screen game that we see from Tennessee, that quick screen game to Jeremiah Smith and some of these other guys that we see from Ohio State? How would you go about it?
If I'm Ohio State and Chip Kelly, if there were going to be a team to pitch backwards, I think it would be them. As good as Ohio State's running backs are, they're not good at running the ball this year. I think
it's offensive line.
Offensive line. I think Ohio State's more of a finesse team. If I'm Tennessee, I don't need to be anybody else than who I am. And kind of the keys I look at, if you're Tennessee, obviously you have to control the run game with Dylan Sampson. You have to, and I think you need to set that early. I think you get in the red zone, obviously you need 7 points and not 3. And I think Nico needs to be protected. You can say a lot of things about this Ohio State defense, but from their front seven to their back end, they're pretty damn good, and they're pretty good at getting to the quarterback. So if you're Nico, I think his legs will come into play here. And if you're Ohio State, I wouldn't be surprised if you pitch backwards. But Ohio State also needs to know who they are, right? They don't need to try to beat Tennessee in the way Tennessee beats teams, all right? Ohio State needs to get the balls to their best players, and they need to get into it early. If you know anything about Tennessee, their front seven is extremely good, but there are problems in the back end. With Jeremiah Smith and Ohio State, with these guys, I'm establishing early dominance. If I ever get a one-on-one matchup with Jeremiah Smith, I am taking it. Chip Kelly can't fall into the problem of turning Ohio State into a team that they're not. They are not a great running the football team. You need to spread it out. You can establish the run in different way, quick passes, short screens, RPO game. That's the way Ohio State needs to lean in this game, and to get Nico and Tennessee in obvious passing downs. And if you can do that, it obviously limits the playbook for Tennessee. You know what's coming, and that starts with what? That's stopping the run game early. If I'm doing anything to take away from Tennessee, I am taking away Dylan Sampson and the run game. If that means adding an extra hat or whatever you have to do, that's what I'm doing first.
Yeah, and I think you would feel better about funneling resources into the box if you're Ohio State as compared to Tennessee, because while Tennessee does have good weapons on the outside, they do not have what Ohio State has. But again, I thought the game plan for Ohio State against Michigan, and I hate to say this about a guy that's as smart as Chip Kelly, he's forgotten more football than I know, was unbelievably immature. I think he pulled a Jim Knowles from a couple years ago just on the offensive side of the ball. Remember Jim Knowles against Michigan? They went zero coverage against a Michigan offense that couldn't hit explosive plays. And when you go zero coverage, you're one step away from not giving up a first down, a touchdown. And Michigan was able to take advantage of that. Well, the opposite end of that on the spectrum is what Ohio State tried to do against Michigan. To say, you know what? We're just going to line up and try and bully you. To Blaine's point, that is not their game. But as far as running the ball, that's why, again, this game is fascinating, because I think there's so many similarities in the way these teams are kind of put together outside of Ohio State's lack of ability to run the ball and Tennessee's, ability, or at least up to this point, the ability to run it, but the quarterback run game. Right? This is the Bourbon Bowl, man. You don't hold anything back. If Nico's got to run it, they got to run it. Quarterback design runs, creating, improvising outside of the pocket. Will Howard running the ball as well with quarterback design runs. I'm just wondering, David, if you are Tennessee, you got to go out there and say we're going to get in our base stuff.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have to funnel resources early against this Ohio State offensive line. But if you're Ohio State and Jim Knowles on defense, you say, you know what? We know that Tennessee's going to quick game us on the outside. They're going to now screen us. They're going to try and hit the skinnies in the middle and then take shots vertically. But if I can put Caleb Downs in that box and stop Dylan Sampson, I would feel a lot better about my chances if I was Ohio State, especially being at home.
Well, I've been saying all season I would take a ton of rollout packages for Nico to the right and to the left. A lot of people think, hey, you don't want to roll out with right-handed quarterbacks to the left. I take a ton of rollout packages to both sides because it eliminates half the field, half the reading that he has to do for a young quarterback. Plus, it gets a great running quarterback already on the move for those, passing and running options. I agree with what you said about Chip Kelly's play calling against Michigan. I will say his play calling on the road at Penn State was phenomenal. I thought he was the MVP of that game. I have a clip for most of the things you brought up, except I don't have Nico or Will Howard running the football. But can we just bring up 18B first? Let's just start with that, because this was what I was talking about. And we could have pulled 20 different clips from this game against Michigan, the way they were setting the edge. And Mason Graham, who declared today for the NFL, by the way, he's
very talented.
Maybe Tennessee's in the top 5 pick. But he was able to feast in the middle, and part of why he was able to is because the defensive ends were able to set hard edges against the Buckeyes for an entire game. This was in the red zone here. Go ahead and run this.
Draw.
And it was like that for most of the game.
I mean, that's just winning one-on-one blocks. And again, I've got no problem with trying to set things up and finding a run game that way. But there's just something that I've said this all year, and I want to give Will Howard credit. Played really good at Oregon, right? Against Penn State, I thought he played pretty good as well. But there's still something about him when the run game is not there, having to throw them to wins in tight coverage, which, Blaine, as much as you may not trust the Tennessee back end, I've been pleasantly surprised at how much they've improved. You look at some of the personnel that they've had back there. I think they can hold their own, but I don't know if Tennessee has seen a wide receiver group like this as well. But can Will Howard make the throws down the field? I know he can make the quick throws, but the throws down the field.
I mean, compared to the best thing about Tennessee's defense is their front seven, right? I think we all three can sit here and agree with that. But the somewhat weak part of their defense is their back end. And you got to look at the ingredients of what becomes a national championship. Go look at the last 3 national champions, right? I mean, Michigan, Georgia. What could those teams do? They could run the ball and stop the run. If you can't run the ball against this Tennessee team, Will Howard is not good enough to throw you to the win.
That's my whole
I don't care if you have Calvin Johnson and Jerry Rice on the outside.
But is Nico good enough to throw Tennessee to a win?
I trust Nico's arm a lot more than I trust Will Howard's.
Really?
I trust Tennessee's scheme a lot more than I trust Josh Heupel. Tennessee knows who they are a lot more than Ohio State knows who they are. They look in the mirror and say, this is who we are, this is what we do, and we're going to be great at it. You can't just show up Saturday to Saturday with a different scheme and say, oh, we're going to try to beat this team like this. Sooner or later, you have to fall back on something that you're best at. And what Ohio State is best at right now, which is surprising with Henderson and Junkins at running back, it's throwing the ball to these receivers. So if Tennessee can make Ohio State one-dimensional early, you're in trouble because now the back end knows. And now that front seven can get after Will Howard, get after him.
So play clip 18A to this point, because when the Buckeyes couldn't establish a running game, this is what it led to a mistake here in critical territory for Will Howard.
Will Howard. 3rd down and 9 at the 4. Howard throwing out of his own end zone.
And that's not Will Johnson over there.
No.
Right?
I'm telling you, man, there's something about this cat throwing that I don't trust. And it's sad. I hate to say that when you got the type of receivers that he has, but it's the mistakes in crucial moments and the lack of ability to have the natural feel as they throw. We talk about Quinn Ewers all the time. There's some deficiencies to Quinn Ewers' games, but when he is protected, he has a great feel as a thrower to put the ball in spots. I just don't know if Will Howard has that.
Now bring up clip 19 to Blaine's point about the RPO, because here's something we've talked so much about how Oregon, for instance, supplements the run with quick passing game. Well, this isn't a now screen. Jeremiah Smith has caught a couple now screens for touchdowns. This is more in the RPO fashion off of the slant. But watch how Marshall spins down, and I know it's against Marshall, but watch how they spin down here. Will Howard's running this RPO pitch concept and hits a quick slant here to Jeremiah Smith.
Say he's a biscuit for being overweight. Over the middle. 1, the ball caught.
And that's the kind of stuff they can get going.
And if I'm Tennessee and I'm Tim Banks and I'm watching this, again, this is why I will go back to, if I can play with an even box and stop the run, I am not pressing these guys at Ohio State. I am not playing low with my secondary, even if I'm in man free.
So you're free release all day?
I'm going to play, if I'm running cover 2 and you feel like you got a free release and I can jump things like we saw Michigan do sometimes, that's the best way to play it. Now, I'm not saying you don't show something early and then maybe press bail out of some of it, but I am not living in a world where we're playing man free and I'm going to give up a slant. He's got to make a safety miss and we got to go win. I would love to sit in too high, and that's the difference, I think. Can Ohio State sit in too high and stop the run against Tennessee? I think there's a possibility, but can Tennessee sit in too high and stop the run against Ohio State? I think that's a probability. And to me, that may be the difference in this game where the weight doesn't have to get put all on Nico. And then it goes back to if you're Tennessee, what you're going to run tempo because that's who you are. But what level of tempo are you going to run? Because there's two different outcomes. One, you run tempo and it's working, so you keep your foot on the gas. Or two, you run tempo and it's working, your defense is stopping them, but you want to keep your defense on the sideline, so you slow it down. If Tennessee has the ability to put their foot on the gas and operate at warp speed and then say, you know what? We got Ohio State in 3rd and 6s and 3rd and 7s and 3rd and 9s, and we're playing 2-man, right? And Will Howard can't beat us, or we're playing quarters, or we're playing 6, and we're able to mix up and he can't beat us. At what point offensively do you say, you know what? Let's slow it down. Let's lean on them. Let's keep our defense fresh for the second half, especially on the road. Those are the type of 4D chess games that I want to see in this game. Not just the regular, run of the mill. They need to run the ball good. They need to throw the ball good. We know that, but you watch this show to get that type of analysis.
Well, the last clip that I have for this game deals directly with what you're talking about. Pull up clip number 20, please. And this is an example of even in games where Tennessee's offense struggled, and certainly they struggled against this Arkansas defense, they have the capability to do this at any time.
Let's play it.
The dirt on this 3rd down. They try to run for it and breaking free.
And that's 3rd and 4.
Yeah.
And you know what? To be honest with you, I don't think I would not be shocked at all, David, in this game if we did not get a run over 25 yards. Mm-hmm. But I think a 10-yard run in this game is going to feel like a 40.
I think weather will have a lot to do with it.
It will, but when you look at, especially with Ohio State and who they have at safety, it's really hard to get past the second level. No offense to Arkansas, no offense to Alabama or some of these other teams, but trying to hit, it's not like Michigan sat there and just hit home runs in the run game against Ohio State. Oregon was able to, Dylan Gabriel was able to, I think he threw for 341. He was able to precisely target Ohio State in certain areas, especially in underneath coverages. And they got a tight end. I mean, Oregon's tight end is one of the best in the country. We got a clip we're going to show on that here in a little bit. But I'm to the point now where I think this game is going to be low scoring, and your typical 70-yard play is probably not going to happen, but the 30-yard play may be just as important, and a field goal may be worth a touchdown.
Caleb Downs is a lot better closer to the line of scrimmage. I mean, if you've watched Ohio State this year, what has he done all year? He's got closer and closer and closer to the line of scrimmage. I think penalties will play a huge role in this game. Who can stay on schedule? And I want to ask you both, how much designed quarterback or run are we going to see from both these teams?
I think you're going to see a lot more from Will Howard than you will Nico. Now, let me preface this. I don't consider the zone read a designed quarterback run, right? That is a true read, just like the RPO is a true read. The difference between zone read and the RPO is that a zone read is a run either by the quarterback or the running back. An RPO can be a run by the quarterback or the running back, but there's also a pass that is attached to it. So as far as Q power, Q counter, power read. I think you're going to get more of that from Ohio State, and I think they have to do that to get an extra blocker in there and truly get a hat on a hat. As far as Tennessee, David, I like your idea about supplementing some of the run game with the rollout passes, especially arm side, but you're going to get a lot more zone read, and then you're going to get that now screen out there. Tennessee's going to test you. Yeah. There's a reason they line up in the splits like they do to be able to test you wide.
Yeah, people don't realize how much those splits just cause trouble for defenses.
Well, it messes with dividers,
Yeah, it messes with your divider. It just thins you out so much, and you have to rely on those safeties, especially if it's one-on-one in the hole. You have to make those tackles. And one-on-one in the hole against Dylan Sampson, good luck, buddy.
Well, and out wide, I think that OSU will tackle well in space. I like the under, to your point. I think it's going to be a hard physical game. Points hard to come by. To answer your question specifically on how much design quarterback run for each team, significantly less than I would call, probably, is what we'll get.
Like I said, it's the Bourbon Bowl. You can't hold anything back. What's up, everybody on YouTube? Appreciate you guys being here. If you don't mind, be a gentleman, gentlewoman, whatever, just hit the subscribe button.